The movie starts with Solomon and a group of slaves being told how to harvest sugarcane. While they work hard under the sun, a man watches from a wagon, fanning himself like a diva. You can't help but think he's definitely giving off strong Yas Queen energy. Later that evening, during dinner, Solomon quietly saves some berries. He plans to use their juice as ink to write a letter asking for help. Sadly, it doesn't work. The berry juice is too watery, and Solomon feels disappointed. That night, while everyone is packed tightly in the sleeping quarters, a woman suddenly crawls next to Solomon and forces herself on him. She misses her husband deeply and begins to cry. Afterwards, Solomon lies awake, thinking of his own wife and children. But life wasn't always like this. Years ago, Solomon was a free man living happily in Saratoga, New York. He was a talented violinist, well-liked and respected in the community. One day, he joyfully says goodbye to his wife and kids as they leave for a cooking job out of town. Later, while walking through the park, Solomon's friend introduces him to two men, Mr. Brown and Mr. Hamilton. They say they work with a traveling circus and are looking for a violinist. They offer Solomon a generous paycheck and promise he'll be home before his family returns. Solomon agrees and travels with them to Washington, D.C. One night, after a successful show, the three go out to celebrate. When they pay Solomon, he notices it's more than agreed. The men smile and say it's because he did such a great job. They start drinking, and one of the men carefully watches Solomon as he finishes his drink. The next morning, Solomon wakes up shackled in a jail cell. It turns out Brown and Hamilton's real plan was to drug him and sell him into slavery. Just a reminder, never trust balding white men who wear hats. When his captors enter the cell, Solomon tries to explain that he's a free man. But they have no intention of acknowledging the truth. Instead, they claim he's a runaway N-word from Georgia. Then they beat him and leave him curled up in pain. Eventually, Solomon is thrown into a pen with another man named Clemens and a young boy. Clemens, who is educated, was enslaved by someone else before being captured again. Not long after, a woman named Eliza and her daughter are brought in. She quickly hugs the young boy, who turns out to be her son. Although Eliza already senses the tragedy awaiting her and her children, she tries to stay strong for them. Sometime later, Solomon and the other captives are chained and transported to a boat under the cover of darkness. They're led into the ship's hold, where they're packed in like cargo. Solomon meets a man named Robert, who suggests they fight back and take control of the ship. They weigh their options carefully but decide to remain cautious for now. At night, a sailor tries to assault Eliza, but Robert defends her and gets killed. Solomon and Clemens throw his body overboard. Clemens later pretends to be loyal to his old master and ignores Solomon. A trader named Freeman renames Solomon as Platt. When Solomon hesitates to respond, Freeman slaps him. Freeman sells Solomon and Eliza to a man named Ford, but separates Eliza from her children. Eliza breaks down, and Solomon is forced to play the fiddle to cover her cries. At Ford's plantation, Solomon impresses Ford by improving the logging process and is rewarded with a violin. But Tibeats, a cruel handler, becomes jealous. When Tibeats attacks, Solomon fights back. Later, Tibeats and others try to lynch him, but Chapin intervenes. Solomon is left hanging for hours until Ford rescues him. Fearing for Solomon's life, Ford sells him to a cruel man named Epps. Solomon begs Ford to help, but he refuses. At Epps' plantation, life is brutal. Solomon is whipped, and Epps favors a slave named Patsy, causing tension with his wife. One night, Epps drags Patsy out and assaults her, then forces everyone to keep dancing. Later, Mrs. Epps sends Solomon shopping. When she sees him reading the list, she warns him that no good can come from reading just work. On his way to the store, Solomon considers running away. However, he stumbles upon a lynching and watches in horror as two men are hanged. The sight breaks his spirit. While gathering Mrs. Epps' items, Solomon notices a bundle of paper that catches his attention. Upon returning to the plantation, Mrs. Epps casually asks if he ran into any trouble. Solomon lies and says no. One afternoon, Epps sends Solomon to retrieve Patsy from a neighboring plantation owned by a man named Shaw. Patsy is there visiting Mrs. Shaw, who used to be a slave but was elevated in status after marrying her master. Epps fears Shaw might make a move on Patsy and take her away. Although Solomon is in a hurry, Mrs. Shaw insists he stay for tea. When they return to the Epps plantation, they find Epps drunk. Solomon quietly warns Patsy to keep her head down and go straight to her quarters. Epps sees this and misinterprets it. Jealous, he lashes out at Solomon, trying to teach him a lesson. As Epps chases Solomon around the yard, Mrs. Epps steps in, accusing her husband of being obsessed with Patsy. She calls him a heathen and ungodly. Later that night, Epps enters Patsy's quarters and rapes her, even choking her as he finishes. During the next forced late-night dance, Mrs. Epps berates Patsy for her husband's unfaithfulness, blaming her and clawing at her face until she bleeds. Tired of her misery, Patsy later begs Solomon to end her life in exchange for a piece of jewelry. Much to her despair, Solomon refuses. Eventually, a plague hits Epps' cotton fields. He believes it's God punishing him because of his sinful slaves. Left with no choice, he rents them out to his acquaintance, Mr. Judge. Before they leave, he warns them not to bring any plagues to their new master. Back in the present, the day after Solomon is taken advantage of by a fellow slave, he's summoned by Judge. Judge has heard about Solomon's musical talents and recommends him to a friend who's hosting a party. He promises Solomon can keep the money he earns. After some time, Solomon and the others return to Epps' plantation. Epps greets them with fake joy, clearly pleased to have them back. As Solomon walks by Patsy, she gives him a bitter, wounded look. Solomon returns to work in the cotton fields, now alongside a new man named Armsby. Unlike the others, Armsby is a paid laborer trying to earn money to rebuild his life. By the end of the day, even though he picks far less cotton than Solomon, he isn't whipped. Later that night, a man named Armsby helps care for Solomon's wounds. He seems kind, so Solomon trusts him and asks him to secretly send a letter to his friends in the north. Solomon even gives him all the money he has. Armsby agrees. Solomon writes the letter, but before he can give it to Armsby, Epps finds out. Solomon quickly realizes Armsby betrayed him. Luckily, Solomon hasn't handed over the letter yet. He stays calm and lies, saying Armsby made it all up to get a job as overseer. Epps believes him. That night, Solomon burns the letter, his chance at freedom gone. Time passes. Solomon is sent to help a carpenter named Bass, who is from the north and hates slavery. Solomon is interested in him right away. One Sunday, Patsy goes missing, and Epps gets angry. When she returns and says she just went to get soap, Epps doesn't believe her. He forces Solomon to whip her. At first, Solomon refuses, but Epps forces him. Epps then takes the whip and beats Patsy badly. Later, Solomon tells Bass everything. Bass believes him and agrees to secretly send a letter to Solomon's friends. Sometime later, a sheriff arrives at the plantation and asks for Platt. Solomon answers. The sheriff points to a man in the carriage. It's Mr. Parker, Solomon's friend. Parker confirms Solomon's identity, and the sheriff says Solomon is a free man. Epps tries to stop them, but the sheriff tells him to back off. Before leaving, Solomon hugs Patsy goodbye. Then he returns home, where he reunites with his family. His daughter introduces him to his grandson, who is named after him. Overcome with emotion, Solomon cries. Later, Solomon tries to take legal action against those who kidnapped him, but the law doesn't help. He spends the rest of his life fighting against slavery and sharing his story. No one knows when or how Solomon died. That's the end of the movie. What did you think? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.